Most businesses only focus on growing and expanding, and they give little to no attention to their exit strategies until after exit is staring them in the face. Learn here at Boosting Business Value, brought to you by Blue Sky Business Resources. You'll discover how to shape a more durable and saleable business, and how to implement a powerful, well-planned, and rewarding exit. Join Dr. David Gruder and Jason Tazinkowicz as they deliver actionable tips for lower middle market company owners, executives, and their trusted advisors. Find out where your business currently stands, how you can meet your revenue objectives more reliably, and how to grow your venture to the next level, all with a smooth and fruitful exit in mind. Here are your hosts, Dr. David and Jason.
Welcome. In this episode, we're going to explore a little known yet really important key to culture building in business, a thing called Tensions Competence. For those of you who are new to the podcast, I'm Jason Tazinkowicz, Chief Operations Officer for Blue Sky Business Resources. And with me is my good friend and colleague, Dr. David Gruder, the Business Lifecycle Exit Planning and Post-Acquisition Organizational Psychologist for the team. Hey, Doc, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. And you?
Fantastic. Thank you much.
Fantastic. Well, let's plunge in. Let's start with a little bit of framing because this concept of tensions competence is not a well-known term. And yet it's a pretty simple thing once one understands what it is. So what tensions competence is our capacity to navigate ambiguity without falling into the trap of either or thinking. And another way of speaking about or framing tensions competence is that it's our capacity to think multidimensionally about issues rather than just one-dimensionally about them.
Yeah, and that's great. It's so important in businesses as well as in life because tensions competency is a way to minimize anxiety or manage the anxiety that you have internally from not knowing all the answers and from not having what's known as complete information. But also as part of a group setting, it helps to facilitate and open the doors to better brainstorming and problem solving in those group settings. So this is something that I don't hear people talking about. But as we go through this episode, I hope all of you listeners will see why the doc and I get so excited about it, because it's something that once you know it and you start practicing it, like any other muscle, it'll strengthen and you'll see the outcomes and the opportunities from yourself and your business growing as that muscle gets stronger.
Absolutely. And we're not going to stay on an abstract conceptual level. We're going to get into the how-tos and all of that. So we're going to move next into 4 big challenges that Jason and I see with developing and utilizing tensions competence. And the first is our cultural context. So culturally, we're bathed in either or polarization thinking. And like it or not, that kind of collective dysfunctional consciousness does bleed over into how people on your team relate to each other at work. And I'm talking about well-intended people. So this is not intentional. It's just a natural bleed over from cultural programming. So to unpack that a little bit, one of those pieces has to do with something that's been referred to for a while now, especially in propaganda theory circles, as information bubbles. And what an information bubble is actually the result of internet algorithms, social media algorithms, search engine algorithms that track what we seem to be interested in. And whatever that happens to be, the algorithm makes a point of showing us more of that. And so what ends up happening, and ego in search of evidence always finds it, although this is now automated through algorithms. And so whatever we indicate by our actions that we're interested in, we get more of that. And as an inadvertent result of that exposure, that reinforcement, we end up believing falsely that we're actually getting exposed to the whole picture around whatever issue or theme or orientation or paradigm, worldview, et cetera, that we align with. when in fact, we're only seeing the slices of that larger picture that the algorithm is showing to us because of what we've shown we have interest in. That's what an information bubble is. And information bubbles lead to the mindset that I call I see facts, you tell lies, meaning I know the whole picture because I don't know that I'm in an information bubble, and I think I'm seeing everything. And anything that doesn't conform to that information bubble must be a lie, therefore. And there's a great quote that connects with this. And the quote goes like this: "The enjoyment of moral outrage is one of the key sentiments that an expert by the name of Max Fisher sees being exploited by algorithms devised by Google for YouTube and devised by Meta for Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, which discovered they could monetize our impulse to moral outrage by having their algorithms promote hyperpartisanship. Divisiveness drives engagement, which in turn drives advertising revenues." And this is from someone named Tasman Shaw in an article called "How Social Media Influences Our Behavior and Vice Versa," which was a review of Max Fisher's book, The Chaos Machine, which examines the psychological impacts of technology. This is the mindset, the one-dimensional thinking, tensions incompetence mindset that people come to our businesses not knowing they're suffering from.
One of the great things about being a human being is we don't have to process only in zeros and ones. To follow up your quote with a little bit more concise version, the great David Bowie is known for saying, "I don't want knowledge, I want certainty." And I think that's where a lot of people reside. And it makes it difficult because we reside in this place of wanting certainty, but there's a part of our logical brain that knows that there's no such thing as perfect knowledge or complete information. And that's where the tension starts, because we feel like we have to have the answers. But in order to have the answers, we have to have the context and the understanding and the knowledge. And so we're striving for that. And people deal with this in different ways. You have these great cliches in our world right now. You've got analysis paralysis for the person who wants every fact before they will make a decision. And then you've got the people who shoot from the hip. They don't care if they have all the facts or not. They've got an opinion. And so people without any training, without any real thought, they deal with this ambiguity in one of those extremely polar ways. And they feel the tension of knowing that what they're doing isn't right. There's this great book, Thinking Fast and Slow, and it talks about how the limbic brain uses basically context and our innate fight and flight response and relationship building to make snap decisions. But context and more complex decisions really need to be processed in our cortical brain. And that takes a lot of work. Our brain doesn't like doing the work. So it always pushes decision-making back down to the limbic system. If we can slow down and get comfortable with the idea that we don't have perfect knowledge, but we still can get context to make better decisions, we can start to reduce the anxiety that we feel when we know that we're making a decision that we aren't really sure of, or not making any decision when we know we need to.
Yeah, well said. And I'm going to amplify on a couple of those points of yours. The piece you were saying about our limbic system, I refer to that as our reptile brain. And basically what it means is that when we're under anxiety, our brain gets flooded with stress chemicals, norepinephrine and adrenaline, cortisol, those kinds of stress chemicals. And when those are flooding our brain, the impact that has physiologically, neurologically, is that it turns off the thinking part of our brain and turns on the reptile limbic system part of our brain. And the entire repertoire of our limbic system, of our reptile brain, is fight, flight, freeze, that's deer in the headlights, or faint, play possum, play dead, hoping that the threat will pass if you don't move. And so that state makes it impossible to think things through. On top of that, our thinking part of our brain, as neurological researchers often say, is wired for closure. And what they mean by that, what that phrase is shorthand for in neurological research, is that our brain goes out of a state of agitation and into a state of rest when we can tell ourselves a story that we can feel comforted by, regardless of its level of accuracy or inaccuracy.
So true. And as business owners, it's more important to be accurate than to be at peace, right?
Yes, for sure. So certainty, as you were saying, Jason, is expected. And there is this belief that certainty can be achieved. The impacts of that false certainty in how we go about decision making are massive and dysfunctional, because when we expect certainty and believe that certainty can be achieved, we're not interested in multiple perspectives. We want one-dimensional, one perspective thinking that is going to cancel out every other form of thinking, and we're going to make decisions based on that perspective, and we're going to be erroneously thinking that those decisions are high-quality decisions. And then when those decisions backfire, we scratch our heads and think to ourselves, well, I made a good decision. How did everything go to HE double hockey sticks in a handbasket?
Yeah, and this whole indoctrination that you were mentioning as part one about the information bubbles, it feels a lot easier to have certainty when you surround yourself with people that say the same thing you want to hear. But you'll notice in cultures, in business environments where the boss is my way or the highway, it doesn't permeate down to the front ranks very well. You'll start to hear the grumblings and dissensions of the people who have other ideas that don't get heard. Not only is this an element of learning tensions competence so that you can make better decisions, it's also going to be learning tensions competence so that you can have a more inclusive culture, because it's that inclusivity that breeds better perspective and then stronger decision making. And I think to wrap up the key four challenges, just like we mentioned a lot in this podcast, any form of personal actualization and cognitive decision making and cultural genesis, those things aren't being taught in any school right now. And so these are things that we as human beings are expected to just figure out as we mature and grow as leaders. And now in this day and age, especially in the hyper-connected information world, we are expected to figure out how to actualize while the rest of the world is creating a sociological environment that pulls us in the opposite direction. And so the more we can start having these conversations, sharing amongst our peers and the business world as a whole, the more we can create a network of like-minded, self-supporting individuals that can raise the tide for everybody else. And I think that the consequences of missing this skill are dire, not only for businesses, but you think about the physiological nature of executives in our world. They're dying of stress-related disorders on a massive scale. They have poor health. They don't have happiness in their life outside of work in many, many cases. And it's all part and partial to being pulled in two different directions. One direction as a great leader and one direction as what society says is the ideal. And tensions competence really plays a role in all of this.
And let me just add one thing about that, which is as business owners, we basically have two choices. We can piss and moan and complain over how the people who come to work for us don't know how to think, or we can, in authentic compassion, and I saw that you smiled, and of course, that's not an uncommon reaction, or we can have compassion for the fact that people come to us because they're bathed in that mindset long before they came to us, and we can take responsibility for not only selecting teachable people, which is absolutely crucial, coachable people, but then providing them with this kind of training that we'll unpack in starting now, actually, in the solutions roadmap that you're going to kick us off into, Jason.
Yeah, so let's get right into that. The first thing that I think is important for anybody as you're starting to recognize this tension, even before you try to overcome the tension, but as you're starting to recognize this tension in your decision-making process, in your strategic discourse, in these challenging conversations, I would like to say use the slow down, cool down method. And this works both when you're in a good environment or when you're in a bad environment. When you think you have a perfect answer, your adrenaline kicks up, your heart rate kicks up, you see it all perfectly clearly in your mind, and you just want to charge ahead without getting any other input or any other feedback, that you're really hot on the trail of an answer. And that's a great time to cool down and say, hey, wait a minute. Let's just see what could go wrong with this. What am I blind to right now because I see this vision so clearly? And then the other side is when you don't see the vision clearly, but everybody's looking to you for an answer as the leader, and you feel like you're under the clock and you have to provide an answer. And that's when slowdown really comes in, right? Start saying, okay, let's make sure first we understand the problem. And in talking through with the people who are looking for an answer from you, how to define the problem, everybody will learn more about what potentials there are for a solution. Then you can start to work toward, okay, how many different ways can we come at this problem in an effort to resolve it? And by doing that, by slowing down, by cooling down, and by taking a little bit more time to ask questions before providing the answer that is either on the tip of your tongue or it feels like is required instantaneously of you, you can reset, refocus, and make sure that you lift your head above the problem to see the environment that problem exists in.
The punchline for me about slowing down is first, don't just do something, sit there.
That sounds like a Yogi Berra.
Yeah, I know, right? And so obviously we all know as business people that there are times when the thing to do is not just sit there, but do something. The slow down piece comes first. First, don't just do something, sit there. This is why reptile brain management and restoring our capacity to think multidimensionally must come first before deciding what to do. So that leads to the second piece of the roadmap, which is to make peace with ambiguity and the value of multiple perspectives. Self-management of anxiety and its tendency to seduce individuals into either or thinking is a crucial life skill that applies to all parts of life. It applies to our personal relationships. It applies to our relationship with ourself and dealing with our own inner critic. And it applies to dealing with situations in business. It also applies to politics and governance. It applies across the board. So it's very important that you as a business owner or executive, that you not just value self-management of anxiety, but that you model it. And the more you're able to do that, the more fluent you are in managing your own anxiety, the more capable you'll be of facilitating group management of anxiety, because anxiety is contagious. And there are ways to break the contagion that don't involve lecturing or shaming or blaming or anything like that, which only adds to anxiety anyhow. And group management of anxiety so that people move into a synergistic mindset rather than remaining blocked from thinking multidimensionally and solving things, solving challenges from a multidimensional perspective.
So true. That leads right into this idea of, since we're using a bunch of quotes and cliches in this episode, I want to throw in the one, if everyone agrees, I know we're wrong. And part of what the doctor is talking about leads right into speaking up about your perspective or your lens with the humility that you know that it carries a bias. You know that you're not seeing the whole picture. And if everybody sits down openly and says, here's where I'm coming from. And it's kind of like we talked about before, where if everybody discusses what the problem is, the solutions will become a lot more clear because multiple people see the same problem from different angles. And so having those conversations about where am I coming from? What is my perspective that is going to guide the answers that I offer is really important to making progress in finding a good perspective for a holistic perspective for achieving a solution. It's like the old adage with 5 blind men describing an elephant. No matter where you're touching it, you're seeing something different. But if everybody tells you what they're seeing, they'll probably be able to figure out, oh, we're all at an elephant. It's that same thing. And there's also this idea when there is time to solve a problem, if a problem doesn't require an imminent solution, defining the problem stage and identifying a solution stage should actually come at 2 separate times. Because if you can all spend one good solid meeting making sure that everybody gains everybody else's perspective and sees the problem from a 360-degree panorama, then they can go take a shower. And in the shower is where all the good ideas happen anyway, right?
Right.
So get away from it. Get your mind working on something else, because when your mind is focused on something else, that's when it has its best ability to subconsciously process the connections that make for a great solution. And so anytime that it's a major decision and you have time, break up the process of defining the problem and trying to achieve a solution into 2 separate meetings.
Yes, absolutely. Well said. Totally true. Very effective. So that leads into a starting place for building the tensions competence muscle in yourself and among your team. And that starting place it leads off with understanding that battling over surface positions is a losing proposition, because if you're battling over whose surface position is right, it's guaranteed that you're going to generate an inferior solution. Coercion and compromise are profoundly inferior problem-solving strategies. No matter how much you hear people talk about how important it is to compromise, I'm here to say to you that compromise is only useful as a backup plan, last resort, if true good-hearted attempts to synergize, to collaborate, fail. Then compromise is the backup plan. But compromise is way, way, way far from the gold standard when it comes to problem solving. Surface positions represent something that is very rarely talked about. And when I'm brought into businesses to help the executives do problem solving and strategic planning and decision making and things along those lines, what I teach them how to do is to look behind or underneath their surface positions to find what I refer to as the noble purpose behind their surface position regarding whatever the issue is that's being discussed. And noble purpose is the deep concerns and high intentions that someone has that lead to the surface position that they're advocating. Usually what people hear is the surface position without any clue about the deep concerns and high intentions that led to that position. The position is really irrelevant, as controversial as that might sound to say. What's very relevant and very crucial is the noble purpose, is getting out on the table the deep concerns and high intentions that led to that surface position. And this is why it's crucial, as you beautifully said earlier, Jason, for us to surround ourselves with those who have different perspectives than ours, and then to make a point of paying attention to them.
So true. I love that. Bringing this kind of closer and closer to this comprehensive picture of how we deal with this, what tensions competence really makes possible is the attainment of best-in-class integrated solutions, really coming to the concept that we're making 1 + 1 + 1 = 10 instead of 3. Despite the ambiguity and the incomplete and imperfect information, you're getting perspective. And from all of the different perspectives, you can start to become holistic around the problem, even in the case of known unknowns and unknown unknowns. And once everybody's concerns and their intentions are on the table, this is how you get that perspective. One of the things that I like to say when you're first going at this and you're having a hard time talking about your noble purpose and talking about your perspective, an easy way to start breaking the ice and getting you comfortable with this tension piece is to do a pre-mortem on your solution. Pick any solution that's on the table and go through the room and discuss, okay, we followed that solution to the end and it didn't work. Why didn't it work? That's a pretty unintimidating, unimposing way because it's not anybody was wrong. It's just we followed this to the conclusion. Why didn't it work? And by going through that exercise of imagining that something failed, people often find it easier to start thinking about where was their perspective in the first place. And eventually the pre-mortem doesn't have to be part of the thing. If you love it, great, keep it. But it's like doing your stretches before the workout. It's a way to get your mind thinking in that perspective and foundational way by backing into it.
Yes. And just to piggyback on one part of what you were saying, sharing a perspective that is actually pontification in disguise, lecturing in disguise, won't move the process forward ever. The perspectives that Jason and I are talking about that do move the process forward are perspectives having to do with deep concerns and high intentions regarding the issue at hand. Those are the only useful perspectives. As a way of kind of tying a bow around everything we're saying, I want to offer an image or an analogy. And it has to do with a jigsaw puzzle. Let me unpack the imagery very briefly. It's imagery that captures the essence of multidimensional thinking, brainstorming, problem solving, and decision making. And here's how it goes. In the imagery, imagine that you've got a box full of jigsaw puzzle pieces and you've dumped the box out on a table and you're surrounded by your team. Everyone at the table is a team member. And the first thing in this imagery is that we're going to pretend that when all the pieces are dumped on the table, they're all dumped upside down. And what that represents in this metaphor is that all we see is the surface positions that everyone has. And so the first thing we're doing is we're turning all the puzzle pieces right side up. And what right side up represents in this metaphor is we're looking underneath the surface positions and we're uncovering the deep concerns and high intentions that led to those surface positions. And we're focusing not on the positions, but on the concerns and the intentions, on that level or aspect of perspectives. So now we've got all the puzzle pieces right side up. And now what we want to do in order to solve a problem or deal with a challenge or make a decision or resolve a conflict is we have to understand what we're dealing with first, because treatment before diagnosis is malpractice, whether in medicine or psychology or business. And so in the metaphor, we've turned all the pieces right side up. So now everyone's deep concerns and high intentions are on the table. And sure enough, in the jigsaw puzzle metaphor, there are some people on the team who will naturally gravitate toward finding the corners of the puzzle, and others who naturally gravitate toward finding the edges, and others yet who naturally gravitate toward finding pieces that connected in specific elements inside the puzzle.
I always look at the buildings first.
And so if we polarize, if we're doing one-dimensional thinking, if we don't have tensions competence, then the group is going to polarize into the cornerists, the edgists, and the elementists, and they're all going to fight over who's right, when in fact, all of them are right. All of them are bringing crucial perspectives to the table. And so we assemble all of those deep concerns and high intentions into a coherent picture that then gives us the frame of reference we need in order to gauge the usefulness of potential solutions, potential decisions, potential outcomes. And the last part of the jigsaw puzzle analogy is that unlike a real jigsaw puzzle where on the cover of the box, you see what the puzzle is supposed to look like when it's put together, in real life jigsaw puzzles in business or in any other problem-solving situation, you don't know what the picture is going to look like beforehand. So you've got to be willing to all discover what that is together. So keep this jigsaw puzzle analogy in mind. And I really want to encourage you to start sharing this metaphor, this imagery with your team, because my experience when I do this in the companies that I work with is that it helps people break out of either or thinking and one-dimensional silos and into synergistic thinking and problem solving.
Brilliant. I like it. I'll never build a puzzle the same again. So with all that said, I mean, we've kind of laid out this pretty robust roadmap to success. Let's talk about the key points that we take away from this. And hopefully in the comments, we'll hear if other people took away other key points. For me, it's this recognition that there's a lot of gray space between the quick snap decision maker and the analysis paralysis analyst. And it's in that gray space that things happen, that good things happen. Things happen when you're making snap decisions. They're not always the best things. And if you've got analysis paralysis, well, nothing's happening. That gray space, that huge chasm between these two extremes, that's where the good stuff happens. So just getting comfortable in that ambiguity and knowing that if everybody is sharing their perspective within that ambiguity, the fog lifts substantially.
Yes, indeed. And the other takeaway we want to leave you with, and I agree with you, I'd love to hear additional takeaways that our viewers take from this episode, is that multidimensional thinking through pooling a variety of lenses about deep concerns and high intentions regarding whatever it is that's being discussed is what sets the groundwork for superior brainstorming, problem solving, and decision making.
Woo, take a breath, Doc. That's a good one.
Woo! And, well, we better wrap up on a good one then. So on behalf of Jason Tuzinkowicz and myself, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts and the top of our heads for listening to this episode. We look forward to reading your thoughts and questions and topic suggestions and other requests in the comments section. And we also want to invite you to click the subscribe button so you can be notified immediately when we release future episodes.
That's all for this episode of Boosting Business Value. May your new learning result in the smoothest and most profitable exit strategy for your business. With the right knowledge and guidance, the sky's the limit to what you can do. Do not miss an episode by subscribing to the show. And if you want to learn where your business currently stands, we also have free key opportunity assessments. Find all of them at blueskyadvisors.net/podcast. Thank you for joining us. See you on the next one.